Hello again, and welcome back to Operations Management. In this session, we're going to be talking about direct labor cost. It's one of a key factors in operations because we always need to know how much money is going into a particular part or unit in terms of labor cost, and that's what we'll be discussing today. When we think about direct labor costs, it's the cost associated with serving a single customer or creating a single flow unit. To do this, we take the total wages paid over a period of time, and then we divide it by the flow rate. And that way we get down to how much money is being paid towards a single flow unit. So you can see the costs of direct labor is the sum of all the wages per unit of time divided by the flow rate. A lot of this will become a lot clearer as we go through the example later in today's session. When we think about direct labor, we're also thinking about the labor content and the labor utilization and idle time. So we'll start with labor content. That's the amount of work that goes into serving one customer or creating one flow unit. Now, you can have multiple people working on a customer or working on a flow unit, and what we do is we sum the processing times involving labor. We want to make sure that we only involve direct labor. We're not considering time where somebody isn't working or equipment time or things like that. We're only looking at the labor time. We're also going to look at the average labor utilization by taking a look at how much time is being spent directly on the item, and we're also going to include the amount of time that is not spent, which is the idle time. Idle time is the amount of time per flow unit or per customer where we're paying that resource, we're paying that person, but they're not actually working towards that unit. So that idle time is we take our cycle time, which is designated by our bottleneck because that controls our overall flow time through a process. And then we're going to subtract out the amount of time that's actually being worked on by that particular resource. And what's left is the idle time. Then for that particular unit, we're going to sum all of the idle times across all of the resources. This will be a lot clearer as we go through this example. Now, let's say we have a three-step process, and each step is staffed by a single person. So step 1 takes 15 minutes to work on a flow unit, and that person is paid $18 an hour. Step 2 takes 20 minutes to work on that flow unit, and that person is being paid $20 an hour. And step 3 only takes 10 minutes to work on that flow unit, and the wage for that person is only $12 an hour. So we're going to look at it in terms of the total labor content for the process, the idle time. Once we have the labor content and the idle time, we can calculate the labor utilization, and we can also then calculate the total cost of the direct labor. So here we are again. We have this three-step process. The first step, 15 minutes, second, 20 minutes, the third step is 10 minutes. We add up all of those process times, and that gives us the actual labor content for the process. 15 plus 20 plus 10 gives us 45 minutes of actual labor time for a unit. So far, so good. Now we have to consider the idle time. As you recall, step 2 is the bottleneck. It has the lowest capacity because when we looked at it, it said it had a cycle time of 20 minutes per unit, whereas the others were a lot less time per unit. So now that we know that the cycle time is 20 minutes per unit, we can then calculate the idle time. Step 1 only takes 15 minutes per unit, which means it's waiting around 5 minutes. Step 2 which is the bottleneck, has no idle time. Step 3 only takes 10 minutes per unit, so there's a 10-minute idle time for that step. We add up all of the idle times, and now we have 15 minutes per unit. So we have 45 minutes of content time and 15 minutes of idle time. Now that leads us to our labor utilization. We have 45 minutes of labor content and a total of 60 minutes of labor content and idle time, so our utilization is 75%. So now we have to get to the direct labor. Using the wage rates that were given, we know that our flow rate is 20 minutes per unit, which leads us to be 3 units per hour. 20 minutes per unit, there's 60 minutes in an hour, so we can only create 3 units in that hour. But in that hour, we're paying 3 people. One person's being paid $18, the second person is being paid $20, and the third person is being paid $12, for a total of $50. So we're paying all these people for a total of $50 over the hour, but we're only actually creating 3 units. So our direct labor cost is $50 divided by the 3 units, which yields us $16.67 per unit. And that's the dollar value, their direct labor cost, that goes into further calculations in terms of how do we want to price something, what is the overall cost per unit. This would give us our direct labor cost. So as we went through the example, we were able to calculate these 4 items. One was the labor content of the process by adding up all of the labor content of each step, which turned out to be 45 minutes. Our idle time, where we were able to use the cycle time based on the bottleneck, total that up, that was 15 minutes. So our overall labor utilization was 75%, and our overall cost of the direct labor was $16.67 per unit. Now, I hope this helped in terms of figuring out your overall direct labor costs, and I hope to see you next time.